Okay, so you ready to dive into this? The Salem Witch Trials.
Absolutely. It's such a fascinating but dark chapter, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is we're going beyond just like the basic stuff that everyone knows.
Right.
Like we all know the names, the dates, the kind of broad strokes.
Yeah.
But we're really going to try to unpack like what was going on in Salem.
Okay.
You know, what made this whole thing possible? Why Salem? Why then? And, you know,
Right.
thankfully some listeners send in some really great excerpts from some academic texts
Oh, perfect.
that are focusing on like the social and psychological stuff going on.
Yeah, it's so important to understand that context. I mean, this wasn't just about, like people running around accusing each other of witchcraft.
Right.
There were deep-seated anxieties, fears, all these things happening in Salem at the time.
Exactly, and those are the threads we're going to pull on today.
Okay, let's do it.
So first, can you just paint a picture for us of what life was like back in Salem, 1692?
Sure, so imagine a small, isolated village, right? You're in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, everyone's a devout Puritan, and their lives are completely governed by these strict religious beliefs.
Like super strict, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they saw the devil's influence everywhere,
Wow.
But it wasn't just, like abstract religious fear. They were also dealing with some very real-world problems.
Like what?
Well, you've got economic hardship, right? They were struggling, and then there were tensions with the neighboring indigenous communities, which added to the overall sense of unease.
Makes sense, yeah.
Oh, and there was also political uncertainty back in England, so it was just this like constant feeling of instability.
Wow, okay, so already you have this backdrop of fear and uncertainty.
Exactly.
And then enter the afflicted girls.
Right.
We're talking about Betty Paris, Abigail Williams, and others, and they start exhibiting these really bizarre behaviors.
Yeah.
I was reading in the excerpts about screaming fits, contortions, like even claiming to be bitten and pinched by unseen forces.
It's pretty disturbing stuff.
Yeah, it sounds terrifying, honestly.
Oh, absolutely. And then, you have the village doctor who's completely baffled by these symptoms. He can't find any physical cause, so he just declares that the girls are bewitched.
Oh, wow.
And you gotta remember, in their minds, with their worldview, this wasn't just a diagnosis, it was like a confirmation of all their fears,
Yeah, it's like the village was primed for this kind of explanation.
Totally.
But then it gets really interesting because then it comes down to, okay, who gets targeted?
Right.
And the first accusations are so telling.
Right. Absolutely. You have Tutuba, who is an enslaved woman of Caribbean descent.
Okay.
You have Sarah Good, a homeless beggar, and Sarah Osborne, who was an older woman who just didn't really conform to social norms.
So already you're seeing like existing prejudices and societal anxieties like bubbling to the surface?
Oh, absolutely. It's like the fear found its scapegoats. Because these women were already marginalized, vulnerable, they didn't fit the mold of what was considered acceptable in Puritan society.
Exactly.
They were easy targets.
Okay, so then we have what I think is a really major turning point, and that's Tituba's confession.
Yes, this is huge.
So she confesses to practicing witchcraft and even names other witches in Salem.
Right, and this is where it really starts to spiral out of control.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to wonder about the circumstances of that confession, right? I mean, some historians say that given her situation, it was likely coerced.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't know for sure what happened, but the pressure on her must have been immense.
Yeah.
But regardless of whether it was genuine or not, the impact was undeniable.
Right.
It basically threw fuel on the fire. It was like saying, see, the witches are real and they're living among us. And it just sent this wave of fear and paranoia through the whole community.
So it legitimized everything. Basically.
Yeah.
And then it just snowballs from there.
Yeah.
Right? Accusations are flying everywhere. It's like fueled by personal grudges, power struggles, and just this overwhelming fear.
It's a perfect storm.
We're talking over 200 people accused in a matter of months.
It's a chilling example of how quickly mass hysteria can grip a community, and especially when you factor in the legal system at the time.
Yeah, because they didn't have the same standards of evidence that we have today.
Not even close. I mean, they allowed spectral evidence in court.
Which was what?
Basically dreams and visions. So you could literally be condemned based on someone's dream.
No way. That's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, it really shows you how a flawed system combined with widespread panic can lead to some really unjust outcomes.
Totally.
And it's interesting because one of the most prominent figures involved in the trials was Cotton Mather, who was this respected minister.
Okay.
He was a huge believer in spectral evidence, and his writings and sermons actually had a huge impact on shaping public opinion and making the trials seem even more legitimate.
Wow, so it's like fear and misinformation being weaponized, even by figures of authority.
Exactly.
It's easy to look back now and judge the people of Salem, but the expert you shared argued that we shouldn't just dismiss this as a case of mass delusion, right?
Right. It's much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
I mean, the trials were undeniably a tragedy, but it's crucial to understand the historical context, the social pressures, the very real anxieties they were facing, and the way that fear can just completely distort our perceptions.
Yeah, totally. And you even made a point of saying that there are parallels to modern-day witch hunts.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
Well, think of the Salem Witch Trials as like a case study in how fear, suspicion, and social pressure can lead to the persecution of individuals or groups, right?
Okay.
So if you look at, say, online cancel culture, for example, obviously it's not as extreme as the Salem trials, but there are some unsettling similarities.
How so?
Well, just the speed with which accusations spread online,
Yeah.
the reliance on information that's often not even verified,
Right.
and the pressure to conform to a certain ideology.
Okay, yeah.
Those are all echoes of the same dynamics we see in Salem.
Wow, that's a really interesting point.
And it's something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. So the Salem Witch Trials might be a historical event, but it raises these really uncomfortable questions about how we handle accusations, evidence, and social pressure, even today.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is the importance of critical thinking, especially when we're faced with fear and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because the people of Salem, they were operating with the information they had at the time, shaped by their beliefs and experiences.
Right.
But we, looking back, we have the benefit of hindsight, so we can learn from their mistakes.
Absolutely.
We can recognize the dangers of just blindly accepting information without questioning it.
Yeah.
Without looking at the source, without assessing its validity.
It's like that saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And that's what makes this so important, I think. This deep dive, it's not just about a historical event. It's a cautionary tale
For sure.
that's still relevant centuries later.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to leave it.
All right, well, this has been fascinating.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Salem Witch Trials. Definitely something to think about.
For sure.
All right, until next time.
See ya.